My microphone sound okay?
Yes. All right. Welcome back to Cult to Homeschool. I am here with a very special guest, Matt Bowman, and I am really excited to do this interview today. And so before I dive in, I wanted to give a little bit about Matt. And Matt has been reimagining education for the digital age. He was a former sixth grade teacher turned tech executive and education entrepreneur. Matt saw firsthand how the traditional education system often fails to meet the unique needs of individual learners. And together with his wife, Amy, they have founded Open Ed, formerly My Tech High, which has served more than 100,000 students enrollments across multiple states, all over the world, it sounds like, as well. And just a really big advocate of helping families create the right education for each of their children, correct?
Absolutely, Meg. Yeah, thank you. Great to be here with you.
Yes, I'm really excited about this. So I have to be honest with you. So I've been homeschooling 17 years, right? And I love to read and I read a lot of books, but they've always been very homeschool directed books that are like How to Homeschool, Charlotte Mason, Waldorf, Thomas Jefferson Education. And your book is actually the first book I've ever read that actually goes in and talks about what some of the problems are with the education system. So, kind of tell me how you got there because I know you were a sixth grade teacher. So, kind of tell me how you got to where you are from where you started.
Well, great to be with you, and thankful for that introduction. Yeah, so my wife and I, as we were raising our five children, concluded that each one of them was quite different from each other. We were kind of surprised, I guess, at the start because we were raising each child in the same household with the same set of rules and expectations and cadence and family nights and those kinds of things. And all of a sudden, we realized that each child was just so different from each other. And so we started looking around and seeing what are the different options for our children's education. And that's kind of when the light bulb went on and realized that we probably need to do some extra work and figure out what is the right fit for each child. And as you mentioned, I was a public school teacher. So I saw firsthand how teaching a class of 30, 35 kids, I taught sixth grade. And that's like the fun, really fun time of children that are so different from each other. We have some that are 6'4" and others that are 4'6", and they're just totally developmentally normal, but very, very different from each other. And so we thought, you know what? Let's figure out how we can design customized education for each child. And we just looked at the resources we had around us and we thought, let's tap into everything. Let's not just find these boxes of, homeschooling or public schooling or private schooling or, all the different versions of homeschooling themes or philosophies. We just said, let's pick and choose what's best for each child each year and figure
Yeah.
out how we can let them thrive in their own unique way. And that's when we realized that our family's not unique. Every family deals with children that are different from each other and need something different. So that's really what led to starting Open Ed was, hey, other families must struggle like we are with trying to figure this out. So what can we do to help?
Yeah, so it was so interesting because right off the bat, you start off with standardized testing and standardized education. And it was so interesting and almost frustrating because the education model did not work for me, right? And which is probably why I've loved homeschooling so much. I'm a terrible test taker. And even now, I'm in my 40s. And if I have to take a test, I start to panic. I get worried. I'm like, well, I'm an idiot, right? Like, just, I totally beat myself up. I also had a lot of energy as a kid. As you can see, like I'm still mid 40s and I'm like running marathons still and doing lots of biking.
Nice.
So I had a lot of energy and I talked a lot. So I was kicked out of classes a lot. And just like my maiden name's Roundy. So they'd just be like, Roundy, get out. Like you can never shut up. Right. So I was just reading this, like, oh my gosh, this is why, like, I was this square peg trying to get shoved into this round hole and just they didn't know what to do with me, right? And I wasn't stupid and I wasn't dumb, but it was really hard to work with a kid that doesn't fit this standardized mold. And I'm sure you saw that too with your sixth graders. And I agree, it's such a fun age, but some of them probably did thrive. And then the ones who don't, I don't know, have you felt like your hands were tied behind your back? Like, how do I help these kids succeed when you have to go in a certain an order for the school, correct?
Correct. And yes, in our book, we highlight, you're sounding like a fish, Meg. You're a fish that's been asked to
Yeah.
climb a tree, right? And that's just on all
Yeah.
counts ridiculous that we would ask a fish who's social and active and gets anxiety for tests to go climb a tree. It's not that we don't want fish to do hard things. You are very
Right.
capable and want to do hard things. It's just let's find the hard things that challenge you individually instead of put you in a box or in a fishbowl where you have to, jump out and climb a tree. It just makes no sense. So then I looked at the students in our classroom, and yeah, there was some who were really accelerated beyond the sixth grade curriculum that I was planning for, right? And so I started asking the seventh and eighth grade teachers, hey, can I borrow one of your textbooks to give to this sixth grader? Because he's so far advanced. And they're like, no, you can't give them our curriculum because what will he do next year when he comes to my classroom? He'll spoil the surprise of the
Yeah.
curriculum that we're delivering. And I just thought that's just crazy. Like I want to feed our children with as much knowledge and expertise and passion as they want. So I turned to them and said, sorry, you're going to have to do that on your own. I can't help you. And that just seems so counterintuitive to an educator at heart, wanting to just feed the interest and curiosity. And now on the other hand, the same thing happened where kids would show up in our classroom just not even ready for that. They were struggling with reading or basic math or whatever. And so in order for me to be able to be allowed to have them access curriculum less than sixth grade, I had to go through the IEP process and get them into a resource math class. And they didn't want that. Their parent didn't want that. They just wanted me to help them with, a few tasks or a few skills that they were lacking and bring them up to speed. So it's just a really tough environment for teachers, for kids, for parents. As we say in our book, it's the conveyor belt sorted by zip codes and birth years that makes no sense for humans to be sorted that way. But that's just how it was convenient for the system to do so. So that's what it does.
Yeah, you talk about in the book too about the Prussian model that the American public school system set up after, right? Of bells ringing, factory workers, stand in your lines. And it's just so interesting because never again in your life do you have to live this way, unless I guess you work at a factory, right? Which
Right.
which maybe that's become so automated. I don't know how many factory jobs we still have. But it's just so interesting that we are just treating these children like cattle, and then we're shocked at the repercussions that we are doing. And you talk about this in your book too, about so many different things, seeing like standardized stuff doesn't work and innovative in different ways. But education, why do you think that it is so stuck on like the standardized conveyor belt, birth year, zip code? Why do you think it's just so stuck there?
That could be an hour in and of itself, trying to dive into the reasons why, what we call in the book, the 200-year-old trap.
Yeah.
Why does that trap exist? And how is it built so intently to protect itself from innovation and change? So yeah, lots of reasons. And I conscientiously don't place blame much in the book but it's a collective blame on all of us that from policy to culture, to even sports, to higher ed, to industry. Like there's so many factors that deal with all of this. Like even I read somewhere where Harvard in like the late 1800s said algebra should be something we want leaders to learn. And still in 2025, we have algebra in our curriculum because of that Harvard decision in the 1800s,
Right.
even if that's not what kids need today. It might be better served for them to learn how to code or HTML or learn, the basics of how production, food production is made. Like those are some things that maybe we are more interested in, but it still lingers a couple hundred years later almost of, decisions on what the elite schools wanted in the 1800s. So it's just fascinating
So
to me.
fascinating.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I actually love because I have five sons, right? And most of them are diehard sports fans. My husband's a diehard sports fan, and you had some sports stat stuff in here
Yeah.
talking about LeBron James. And if you live under a bush and you don't know who he is, right? He's like one of the best NBA players of all time. He's a legend. He's just amazing. But if you took his stats, he's technically failing at basketball
Right.
because I don't have them right in front of me, but like 40% free throws and 30% this. And I just laughed so hard because I thought, yes, like this was making so much sense to me. And then you used musicians also. And my I had another son who's a musician, right? And so just instead of this standardized at all musicians must know this or all NBA players must know this, it's like, no, you just progress. And if
Yes.
you don't understand something, you stay there for a minute. And just like you were saying in your sixth grade class, you had some who were advanced, who were so ready for more and just like, yes, give me more. And others, they're like, let's go back to the basics of reading.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the basics of math. And so it's so funny that it's everywhere else in our life, you can see that we allow people to naturally progress. And then this weird timeline for children, and it just kills me.
Well, I need to ask of your five sons and your husband, are they a LeBron James camp or a Michael Jordan camp for the best of all time?
Oh, well, Michael Jordan, but they say Michael Jordan pushed off on Brian Russell when they played Utah Jazz. Even
Uh,
my little guy will say, like, yeah, but he cheated in the
oh, that's
playoffs against the
great.
Utah Jazz.
I
They're
love that they have
diehards.
that history. And, that's a perfect example of history that matters to kids will stick and they'll be able to gain that. They have that knowledge in them. It's not like you
Mhm.
had to force them or make them take a test or prepare a test to know that Michael Jordan pushed off on in
Yeah.
the game. So I just love that perfect example, Meg. That's great. So yeah,
Well,
we even see it today with the best stars are, their stats. If they get 50% of something, they are like a rock star. And it's like, well, that's weird. And so again, we're not trying to lower expectations. We're trying to just be real of
mhm.
an athlete who is the top of his or her game will only make half their shots. And so
Yes.
let's not expect that our kids should make 100% of every shot. That's just literally illogical.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's so interesting too, because you go on and talk about like helping them use what they're interested in, right, to foster their education.
Yeah.
And so for two of my sons that are the biggest sports fans, we're always reading classics and we're always reading about inspiring people. And he finally was like, "Can I read a book about Michael Jordan? Can I read a book about Kobe Bryant?" And so I was like, "Yes, like these men pushed through difficulties and like different things that they did and mindset, but he actually became way into statistics and like
Nice.
wanted to know so much math because he wanted to understand all of these things and like would then study math more so that he could be better analyzing sports stats." And I thought, this is so fun to like just get out of the way half the time and just get them excited to learn it in a way that makes sense to them, that they're excited about. And it wasn't a test about it. He wasn't tested on give me all the stats of everything. And it's cute now. So this son that's the diehard is currently serving a mission for our church. And he called his little brother this morning and all they talk about are stats. Like what's happening right now in NBA, what's happening in baseball, what's this contract. And it's crazy because they're breaking down so many different things with math and even geography, right? Because you have people
Yeah.
from all over the world. And I can't remember this player from the Dodgers, but he has some ridiculous contract for so many years and they'll break it down and like that's like I don't know the number, but like 80 million a year or something
Right.
just ridiculous, right? And so it's so fun to just see what the possibilities are when you have the courage to get off of this conveyor belt and actually customize an education for your unique child.
Yeah, you nailed it, Meg. Is this concept that authentic learning should never be painful. Like it can be
Yes.
hard and challenging, but it shouldn't be awful to just learn new things. And that's sometimes what we make kids feel like is that learning is a drudgery and it's awful, and then we see them learn and grow in something they're passionate about and it sticks. It's interesting to them. They remember it and that's my problem really in general with standardized testing is that there's no motivation. Like we have removed motivation and interest from assessment.
Hmm.
And you just can't do that and have it be an accurate or telling assessment at all. So that's just super interesting how much they love, stats. And I've seen kids transcribe audio from a great clip or a ESPN top 10 highlight. And that's their writing activity, right? Is to just be a transcriber of a cool thing. And then sometimes they'll memorize it and act like the
Yeah.
announcer and use the intonations of voice to re-deliver the most exciting shot they've watched. And that's all learning. That's all language arts. And then you pull in stats and math and culture and geography. And why are the Utah Jazz called the Utah Jazz?
Yes, when there's not jazz music in
When there's
Utah.
not jazz music here, right? It's then we'll trace that backwards and do geography around that. And just as you can intersect interests with needs, something magical can happen with learning. So it's super fun to see.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with the Tuttle twins, but I love
Yeah.
my kids and I love them. And they always have like a catchy catch line, and it says, "When motivation is lost, we all bear the cost."
Yeah.
In one of their episodes. And so it's interesting with standardized testing, we do lose the motivation. And it is funny because, well, sad really that we're bearing the cost, where we are
Yeah.
seeing children, they're like the national average of reading comprehension is plummeting,
Yeah.
right? Writing, all these things are plummeting. And it's because where's this motivation? If you're a bad
Absolutely.
test taker and you don't love it, right? So it's
And I'll
absolutely
even
fascinating.
add that to the profession of teacher because I
Yeah.
like educators and parents as educators and teachers as teachers, but we've removed the joy of teaching from many from
Yes.
the profession because we say, oh, just become a master test prepper and that's all we want you to do because we have so much pressure from outside forces to have those numbers be X. And it's just we've
Yes.
forgotten the teacher, we've forgotten the child, and the system just eats them up. And it's that's why we want to open it up.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you said that because sometimes people think when you homeschool that you're anti-teacher, and
Right.
I'm not, right? And I have girlfriends or friends who are teachers and they've left because they're like, you can't. You're so trapped. You have to teach to a test, and it kills their love of learning and their joy of teaching, and so it's so sad. And what it's interesting too is like, can you imagine if people tried to standardize adulthood?
Right.
Right. I've thought about this often. Like, so what if as a woman, I was supposed to be able to have XYZ skills? And as a father, you're supposed to have XYZ skills. And if you don't, are you failing?
Yeah.
Right.
It's ridiculous. Like you can't even laugh at it. It's so ridiculous. And yet we do that from age 5 to 18.
Yes. Yeah. It's so crazy. And I think you talk about this too in the book as well, is that no life skills are being taught
Right.
really. And so there's a funny meme. It's like people asking 18-year-olds, what are you going to do with your life as soon as they graduate? And they're like, I don't know. A week ago, I had to raise my hand to use the bathroom. Right? Like, you want me to have these
I
life
love that
skills.
example.
But it's so sad. Like, my kids didn't know that was a thing. They were like, "What? Did you have to really do this?" And they've done classes, right? But because it's usually in a micro school or something, that it's just like if you need to go to the bathroom, you go to the bathroom, and
Right.
because it's engaging and it's fun because, like you said, the teacher's there for the joy of teaching, and so they're not trying to get out of class and fake sick in the bathroom and
Right.
dawdle in the hallways and whatnot. And so
Well, no,
it's
you bring up micro schools. I was fascinated even just a few months ago to learn that something like 60 or 70% of micro schools around the country are started by former public school teachers.
oh, that's fascinating.
Like that's where they want to turn because they have a passion for helping kids, for teaching, inspiring the light bulb, and yet they're so restrained from doing that they go start micro schools. And I thought that was super interesting. How really those are the teachers that love to teach and want to help kids and are fine if they get up. They're seeing the light bulbs go on. So if somebody needs to get up and go to the bathroom, get up and go to the bathroom because that's
Yeah.
now getting in the way of your learning instead of negotiating. You've got 3 bathroom passes this semester that
Yeah.
you can, figure out when you want to use it in my class.
Yeah. It's It's crazy. Yes. We've had some positive. We had a cute a mom do a micro school for a year, and it was a really positive experience. But it's funny. So I had three of my kids try it, and two of them absolutely loved it. But my youngest son hated it.
Yeah.
Absolutely hated it. And I was trying to like, did somebody like happen? Is there a kid you don't like? And finally it came down to, he goes, she makes me do crafts. And I go, what? And he goes, I hate cutting. I've never met a little kid who hates cutting like this guy does.
Right.
And something about cutting on a line just angers him greatly. And he was like, she makes me cut. And I go, well, then maybe this isn't for you. And we could do like a sports activity or just you and me, and we can go to museums. And he's like, great, I'm out. So it's really funny, like you said, individualizing it, even though this was a really cute micro school and she was phenomenal, that
Right.
it didn't work for all of my kids.
And one of the chapters, one of the building blocks of the open education mindset is parents, don't let your reputation get in the way of your
Yes.
children's learning. Sometimes it's easy to say, this is a great micro school. This teacher is awesome. You must be forced to enjoy it, because what will people think if I pull one kid out and leave two in there? Do I not value the other two because there's
Yeah.
something wrong? And so it creates all of this reputation insecurity amongst parents. And I have felt it myself. And I highlight in the book, we have really tall boys,
Yeah, I saw that 6'8" and 6'4"
six
or
six,
something.
six
Oh, 6'6".
four, and we had them at different schools because they were choosing to go to a different school. And one dad was just really upset at me that I wouldn't force the taller, older boy to come join his brother and win state, because they could have if we stacked the team with the Bowman
Right.
boys. I'm like, he doesn't want to go. He doesn't want to do that. And he's like, well, you need to be an adult, step up, make him do it. Was like, sorry, that's not how we work. We talk to our children, and that's another
Yes.
principle is give your child a voice, have that conversation. And yeah, we have parameters. It's not just an open do whatever we have, and that's kind of the open ed logo is we have
Yes, I
some
like that.
brackets, but fill in the blank in the middle and have some structure, some guidance. But you don't have to force kids to do stuff that just doesn't make sense for what they want to do in their life.
Yeah, it's interesting. That was a really interesting chapter. I have the book with me if you're on YouTube and whatnot, because I knew would want to pull stuff from it. But it's one of it's building block number 2, put your kids before your reputation. And I thought that was interesting because when I homeschooled, when I started, it was still weird, right? And
Yeah.
maybe some people still think it's weird, but it's becoming more socially accepted post-COVID.
Right.
And so it was funny because I actually would tell my kids when we'd go somewhere new, like, don't tell people we're homeschooled. Let them get to know us. And then they can just like us or dislike us because of our personalities and not because we homeschool,
Not
right?
a prejudge. Right.
Yes. And I even did things too where I wanted the wow factor when people are like, oh, the Thomas kids are homeschooled or something. And like, do you even know this? And I felt like in the beginning, other kids would even quiz them. And so I had stuff ready, like, because I love to teach through songs and entertaining things. And so they're like, well, I can do all the 50 states alphabetically. Would you prefer that with the state capitals or without the state capitals? Right. So, like, it was totally my pride of
Right.
just like, I don't want to be judged because I'm doing something different. But whenever we do something different than the quote unquote norm, it's scary to
Yeah.
be going against the group. And so, what things have you seen of just like your own self of pushing through when people were judging? Like you're saying you have tall sons, of course they should come play, right? What did you and your wife do to kind of push through putting your kids before your reputation?
Well, it was not easy at the start, right?
Yeah.
We mentioned a story of a charter school opened in our area, and it was the first one in the area. And so it was kind of a new concept. And our oldest said, I want to go to that charter school. And so we said, okay, go.
Yeah.
And we were shocked to see the animosity in our neighborhood of how dare you do that? How dare you don't trust your district school anymore? And how dare you go against the grain? We're building communities here, which is an argument for the traditional zip code based public school. But then, most states have open enrollment. You can choose different schools anyway, even if it's within the public school system. So there were kids in our neighborhood going to other schools already, but they were districts, not charter. And so
Right.
then we said, okay, so your issue is the word charter. It's not public because there's other public schools that kids are choosing. So then it just kind of helped us realize that there was just a lot of insecurity. And we realized too that some parents lashed out because they were thinking they aren't making the choice for their children either. And so it felt a little bit like maybe they weren't stepping up and asking what's best for their child. They were just doing, the flow. And so we tried to be really sensitive about that, is that we weren't judging ourselves, we weren't lashing back or being defensive. We just say, hey, we respect parents to choose what's best for their children, and we support that. We want choice. We want people to be able to do that. And so just over time, as we were able to just have those conversations, and then to your, what you shared earlier, all three of our boys, so we started sending the younger ones to the charter school too. And the second one loved it and stayed. The third one hated it and said, no way am I going there. So then we had to make the decision, are we going to have kids, 5 kids in 4 different schools?
Yeah.
And deal with that transportation and scheduling. And we're like, well, that's what's best for our kids. So my wife and I said, let's figure this out. We can solve problems. We can. So the challenge was on us now as adults to facilitate, carpools and ride sharing and this and that and the other to get them in the right schedules. And yes, it was chaotic and messy and hard, but it was for our kids. And so we were, willing to do that. But yeah, we had reputation hits of why in the world would you as a parent send your kid there? Right. So we just had to come up with standard answers like you did and deal with it. You also mentioned, I wanted to point this out, and we share this in the book, the Overton window, kind of what's acceptable in society changes. And we've seen that since COVID, the conversation pre-COVID was, oh, you're homeschooling or you're doing a a la carte education. That's kind of weird or kind of different. After COVID, it's like, oh, I wish I could do more of that. I wish I could open up my child's education more, but I'm scared. I'm nervous. I don't know how to do it. Those kinds of fears now. It's I wish I could instead of what are you doing?
Yes. That has been an interesting shift. And that's where like my wheelhouse is, right? Is because I really help that family dynamic and that family culture, because I'm sure you've seen too, when like you guys are operating together as a family, your children are open and receptive to like, hey, this isn't working or this is working.
Right.
And if you don't have that type of communication going on in a family, then the school has become their new parent, right? And
That's
there's
a great point.
a fascinating book by Dr. Gordon Newfield of why parents need it's hold on to your kids, but he talks about why parents need to matter more than peers. And so when we start using the school systems to parent our children, teach them morals, teach them values, they're not going to know what they want because they want to be like everybody else. And so it's almost teaching them too to care more about what they want versus their own reputation.
Yeah, no,
Right.
that's so true.
Yeah. But it's even interesting. And I think I get better every year, right? So I just quote unquote graduated my 5th homeschooler this year. And she's been utilizing open ed, and she's been attending Southern New Hampshire University.
Oh, nice.
And kids 2, 3, and 4 all got their associates. And so I was like, oh, great, this is awesome. And it looks good and it sounds amazing. And she would be a junior if she were in public school, but she goes, I really want to go to in-person college. I really want the experience. She has 30 something credits, so she can transfer as a transfer student. And she's like, and I'm done. And so it's interesting, like that once again, that comes up of, oh no, she doesn't have a high school diploma. She doesn't have some of these things where my other kids have a diploma, but by their name, right? And so it's like, oh, pat myself on the back. I did a good job. And it's interesting to kind of go through that again of it's okay. She's on her own path and she's an amazing, amazing human. But it's kind of that like, don't worry about what people think or say and do what's best for your kid. Cause this is where the other kids were fine finishing with Southern New Hampshire. And she was just like, I like it, but I really want to specialize in a very different field.
Right.
And so she preferred to go in person. So it's crazy to like, even though I'm 5 kids in that sometimes this still comes up, right?
Like, oh, don't you just want that little diploma so that I can share that with my grandparent or whatever, right?
Yeah. So it's really cute, and just like my own progress as a parent
Mhm.
of letting your kid choose those things. And it's been interesting. Kids 3, 4, and 5 have all finished a year earlier than their standardized conveyor belt. And it's been great to see what they've done. Because kid number 3, she found a nannying job in Puerto Rico and went and lived there for 3 semesters, and then went and taught English in Thailand. And then she served a mission for our church. And now she's headed to Nicaragua. And now she's applying for a school in Hawaii because she just always wants adventure and always something fun. And I thought it would have killed her to just be stuck in a classroom day after
Oh,
day, watching her spark just die.
I love those stories, Meg. And we have a whole chapter and a whole part 3 around open education pathways after high school, because
Yes.
that shouldn't end. We actually, and the part of this was when we were first running open ed for years, parents would come back to us after they left our program and they'd go to a very traditional college and say, this is miserable. The college, we had such a great K-12 experience customizing their education. They were engaged in learning. They loved it. They go to a traditional academic 4-year institution and it's just miserable learning environment. And so they're like, Matt, can you help us figure some of that out? And so that's when that's when we started partnering with Southern New Hampshire, was, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, when families were saying our higher ed experience is worse than our K-12. Our K-12 was so great. What can we do beyond that? And so then we introduced competency-based, college degrees.
And I love that.
And then it's like, well, you know what? The industry moves and shifts, and we really need more licensed, healthcare workers or electricians or plumbers or cosmetologists or pilots. So we support all of that in the open education umbrella. Is just find what works for you. And then what's interesting too, and you've seen these, articles over the last couple of years, even with the continued insane costs of higher ed
Oh,
just
yes.
continuing to go up, because they can just charge against a federal aid that doesn't care about cost, then a lot of kids are concluding it's just not worth the ROI in time and money to go to a traditional 4-year academic institution. And so I love that. And that's also what's contributing to kind of the open education movement is, if higher ed isn't the only path for all, then what is post-secondary high school look like? And it can be very different child to child, as you just described. And so then that says, well, then what's the purpose of K-12? If it's not just to get them a diploma to go to a college, what is the purpose of K-12? And so then that also adds that decision to parents, which creates stress and uncertainty and insecurity. But that's what's driving so much growth around open education, is the change in college, the change in career paths trickles down to the K-12 system. In many ways, people didn't realize how connected those are. And it wants families to now say, well, actually, I just really would love a teenager that loves to learn and is passionate about learning different things. How do I get that goal instead of just getting a credits and diploma?
Well, I love the example in the book, and forgive me, I forgot his name, but a kid that did a TED talk and said, "What do you want to be?" And he said,
Logan.
"I want to be
Yeah.
happy." Yes. And I love that. And then it went on with an example of a family with 2 kids, and the one kid tried college, didn't like it, but then started doing entrepreneurial stuff, was making money, was really enjoying himself, but it wasn't the norm. And so the mom was all worried. And then the daughter went to college. Now she's in debt. She can't get a job. So now she's going to be a hostess because she needs something and she's depressed. But it's like, but she followed the norm, so it's okay.
Yeah,
And
that
I thought
story
that
just
is so powerful.
that story you just cited was a real, and Isaac had shared that one. So that one came from Isaac. But when I read it, I was just impacted greatly, because the mom said, I wish my son were more like my daughter. And Isaac said, well, tell me about your daughter. Well, she went to school. She was straight A's. She got her degree, but now she's depressed and lives in our basement and doesn't know what to do with her life and is, in debt greatly from her college. Okay, tell me about your son. He won't do anything I tell him. He won't go. He dropped out of college after a semester. He's now making 5 or 6 grand a month in his own business and he's loving it. He's thriving. But he just didn't do, the college route. And Isaac just said, there's something wrong with this picture. When a child is thriving, a child is struggling, we need to just, and that's, part of that reputation is the mom just wanted to be able to tell friends and family, oh, my son's in school working on a degree. And so it's just like, let's have parents come up with a different way to answer that question of what your 20-something-year-old is doing instead of just apologizing that they're not in some university somewhere.
Yeah. No, I found it so interesting because my oldest was just like that kid who tried university. So he is my only high school graduate. We tried worked with a charter school that he would go twice a week and did concurrent enrollment, and he got a high school diploma, and he served a mission also for our faith. And then came back and was like, great, I'll do one class. And he loves writing. He is the most well-read kid I've ever met. He blows my mind. He's always writing. He's an epic storyteller. Whenever he's at a park, little kids will just gather like in a way that you're like, hey, everybody knows this guy's like, he's okay. He's just this really captivating storyteller. And it's interesting. So he did this class and he hated every second of it and was just like, I don't care about this, because it was one of the general classes, which I could get on my high horse about general classes. But he's like, I wanted to write. Like, what is this having to do with I don't even remember what the class was, but everyone's like, oh yeah, that's a terrible class. And I thought, no, why are we making kids take it? But he works in um like a factory type job, a metal mart job, where he processes metal. And then he just writes when he wants to. And he studies he's doing Jordan Peterson's college online, where
I
he
love
just
that.
listens to amazing speakers and whatnot. And he's like, and I'm happy. Like, he makes really good money. He's put a book up on Amazon.
Nice.
He's just like doing all these really fun things, but no, he's probably not going to have a university credit by his name, but he's making good money and he's happy and he's doing what he wants to do.
I love that. And you brought up Peterson Academy. I've been tracking that for a couple years before he announced and launched it just last September. And I definitely recommend anyone who feels like they want their child to get some sort of that kind of content around politics and economics and history or culture, some of that stuff that's just great content and it's not overly indoctrination of stuff. It's just some really good content. Peterson Academy has that, and I'm super happy that Jordan launched that. I think it's a great resource for families, and it's very affordable, and it kind of can.
Yeah, they even dropped their price.
Nice. So it's just something that can give kind of that layer of structured content that maybe people think a general ed core meets, which it doesn't, but that's what they think it does. Peterson Academy can address that very well.
Yeah, so I like that we're giving some options. So we've talked about Southern New Hampshire University, and that is acceptable. Like, it is its own university, but you can also utilize it through Open Ed, which is what my family did. But then Jordan Peterson Academy, but Praxis was another one that you've talked about in the book. And I don't know if they changed its name, because I believe the Tuttle twins bought them or something. I can't remember.
Yeah,
but
it's now merged underneath
one of those options.
Merged underneath Libertas. And so that has the Tuttle twins. So that's an apprenticeship type program. So it gives structure and support to 18 plus year olds who don't want to go a traditional college, but want some help in getting that kind of internship, apprenticeship experience in startups or in businesses. So they partnered with industries and then partnered with kind of the high school graduate crowd, or the ones who finished high school time, and find ways to. So if you think about coding boot camps, that was a big thing a few years ago, where it's 12 weeks of just intense coding, and then you get a job as a junior web developer. So Praxis started in that realm of kind of being a boot camp for the non-techies, sales, marketing, operations, back office stuff, those kind of skill sets. It's the equivalency of that from a coding boot camp. And I think it's great because it gives you immediate ways to show your signal of your value to a potential employer, and the value you can bring is so much greater than a GPA from a college, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I've got a B in calculus at school versus this is what I can do for your business. It's so much better for kids to be able to have that structure than just showing a transcript on a resume.
Yeah, you talked about this in the book, and I wish I would have marked that page about things that some jobs want. And it's like your hard work, do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
What are those things that they're looking for?
They want people who work hard, work through problems, can collaborate with others.
Yes.
The whole point, again, just a quick side note on the standardized testing, it's ridiculous that we say, demonstrate, solve this problem, but don't ask any expert. Don't Google search for any backup evidence or research. Like, it's just the antithesis of what real people do. You look for experts, you collaborate with each other, you try to solve problems together, you try to read about it. You want all that skill in a kid. You don't want a kid that just only knows how to follow exact instructions. And it's interesting too that many industry leaders say they have to de-school college graduates because, and you brought up before, even factory workers or today need to be trained by the factory. They have their own set of processes and steps and things to do. They don't want someone in a college to try and teach someone how to do everything. You just can't. And so the idea that industry leaders and businesses have to de-school kids is also a testament to those who embrace open education.
Yeah, you had in there, I was just flipping through and it was the C's get degrees.
Yeah.
And my husband laughed because for his undergrad, he got a linguistics degree and it was D's get degrees. And because like the harder the major, I guess, the lower the grades. And he was like, great, because we were expecting our second baby as he was finishing. He was like, D's get degrees. And so fantastic. Like I can just do the bare minimum, but I can still graduate. So it's just a completely different shift of like really coming to like these are problems with the education system, not necessarily the teacher or the school, but the system is just kind of broken. And so then having the courage to really individualize your child's education of, and I mean, this is my favorite part, right? Of individualizing it. And like, what are you interested in? And some of my kids loved mythology. And so they studied Norse mythology, then Greek mythology and Roman and then Egyptian. And they were so excited. Another kid was like, I couldn't care less. That's weird. Like, I don't want to do that. So I love this idea. I love what you're doing, helping so many people have the courage and the resource, really. So let's just end a little bit about how you support people with open education, with open ed to create these dream education path for their kids.
Well, that's great. So at a high level, Open Education, the book, is advocating for parents to just think differently about their child's education, embrace an open education mindset. That's the purpose of the book. One sliver of that vision is our company called Open Ed, where we partner with public schools in various states to bring resources to families who want to adopt an open ed mindset. So teachers, curriculum, technology, resources that help the family succeed in their open education journey. So we're in a handful of states. Go to our opened.co website, submit your state, see if we're in a state that you're in, and you can join at no cost to the family. So that's a great offer. For those who don't live in a state that we operate in or prefer just a private pay model, we're launching this fall openedacademy.com. So Open Ed Academy is the principles we've talked about today in an accredited private online school. So you can private pay for it. And we, it's fun. We grant you credit for the things that you're doing already instead of the other way around. So if you're playing sport, like it's so funny when you go to PE class, like I played 2 or 3 sports growing up and I could never get credit in PE for all the time and energy I was spending in sports. So
yes,
we do that in Open Ed Academy. If you are, playing sports, that's your PE. If you're working, that's your business, credit, or your language arts credit if you're writing books. So we grant you credit for the things you're already doing. and we just flood you with resources that you can tailor to each child. So super excited about that model of Open Ed Academy going the private pay route. And we're doing it for as low cost as we can, like $2,800 a year for the K-8 kids, and up to $5,000 a year for the early college SNHU Southern New Hampshire program. So super affordable, accessible to all. But we also have the Open Ed program through public schools in a bunch of different states, and that state count is growing every week. We're adding new
Yeah,
states.
I was gonna say, somebody told me there's a spot on your website where you can go say like, "Hey, I'm in this state, and like if you can get into so many people, then we'll come to your
Right.
state." Okay,
Absolutely. We
so
want to make it, accessible to everybody to just be able to embrace. And again, we embrace the public school system under this open education umbrella. It's not against the public ed system. It's like, let's bring everybody in under that umbrella and let's just tap into the resources that benefit kids.
yes, hallelujah. Like I can't say I agree enough of just like letting these kids just cherry pick what works for
Yeah.
them. And I love this. I love this model. The book is amazing. It's on Amazon, correct?
Thanks, man.
Um,
Yes, it is.
yeah, you can see like I'm the terrible page folder. Like I know
That's
people are like,
great.
who are the monsters that fold pages? Normally I would post-it note it, but I was out of my post-it notes. But like I love to mark up books. And I was really blown away. Like I said, this is my first book I've read really about the public education system. And so just kind of what's wrong with it. And we can't go in and fix the system, but we can create a better system for our kids and
Yeah.
for our family and get them off the conveyor belt, get them off of their zip code and their birth year and create the right program for them. So Matt, I just really appreciate you coming on. You said again, the website is opened.co.
Yes.
Okay. And you can find out more information there, or you can grab the book on Amazon. Thanks so much for coming on, Matt.
Thanks, Meg.